Hello, everyone. Once again, welcome to the session two of day five of the third International Conference and Pop Festival for the Youth-led Climate Action 2021. We are delighted to have you all join us for one of the biggest youth-led events for climate action. My name is Drishya Pathak. I'm a Pop Youth Mentor at the Pop Movement, and the Pop family is excited to welcome you to this amazing session, which will focus on the topic youth advocacy for climate education. I would now like to introduce everyone to Karina Weistein, Program Strategy and Innovation Director, FXB International, as she will be the moderator and the host for the session. Over to you, Karina.
Thank you so much, Tricia, and welcome everyone to the first day of the US Festival and our second panel today. So I'm very excited to launch this session, and today's panel will focus on the critical importance of climate education in our fight against climate change. In this panel, youth will gain an understanding of the role of climate education in effective climate action and the different ways that youth can advocate for climate education within and outside of the classroom. We have three renowned speakers who will present their impactful work on climate education, and then we will open it for questions and answers. But also, please feel free to type your questions into the chat box as the speakers present, and then at the end, we'll read the questions. So without further ado, I'm excited to introduce our first speaker, Katie Cashman. Katie Cashman is a 27-year-old activist and climate action lead of the social change platform 2811. Katie works on the promotion of climate action in schools and universities by training teachers and activating student innovation. Katie holds a bachelor in geography from McGill University and a master's in urban management from Technical University Berlin. She worked as a sustainable urban development consultant for UN Habitat for 2 years in Nairobi, Kenya, and has been working with 2811 on climate action organizing since 2019, both in Chile and the US. Katie speaks 4 languages, has articles published in several international media outlets, and co-founded an NGO that recently built a community center in Mathare slums of Nairobi. On top of her work with 2811, Katie's an active member of the Sierra Club and MN350 in her home state of Minnesota. With 2811, Katie has led the Climate Action Academy to train more than 500 teachers and students in environmental education from North and South America within the past 2 years. She's a motivated team leader and organizer driven by the mission to create a resilient future for all. Thank you so much, Katie, for joining us. Over to you.
Thanks, Karina. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you to the whole team from the Pop Festival for this incredible event. Happy to be here with Tricia and Tracey as well. And I'd like to share a little bit about why I think climate education is so important, and how we can improve our education system in order to face the future, the uncertain future that we are up against. So I'll talk a little bit about what's 2811, the platform that I work for, why we work for climate education, and what our training program is, that is the Climate Action Academy. So 2811 is an international platform. We were founded in 2016 in Chile, and we work with universities and schools for regenerative development, especially through capacity building in the areas of social innovation, entrepreneurship, regenerative economics, and climate action. And as you can see, we're located in several countries right now. So if you're calling in from another country and you're based in one of these countries and you want to work with us, feel free to send me a message. So our agenda for climate action is to activate youth and educators to better adapt to the challenges posed by climate change and move us to a low carbon economy. So we've trained 400 high school or middle and high school teachers, almost 500 students in hackathons, and we've collaborated with about 100 universities and 300 university professors in the last few years. We started our program in 2019 when COP25 was being planned in Chile, and at the last minute, COP was moved to Madrid, Spain. We had to adapt our program due to social unrest in Chile. But we were still able to carry out the program and present the results at the COP. We were trained 100 Chilean teachers in the first event and hosted a young climathon with 100 Chilean youth. And we've been working the same in 2020 and 2021. We're lucky that we were able to move our programs to be online during 2020. And this year we're doing both in-person and online trainings and events. Here are a few photos of our team in Chile and Colombia, working with youth in Panama and Germany, and in the last year working with teachers online throughout Latin America and the United States. So why is climate education so important? Well, we know that the last decade has been the warmest decade on record, that global warming is ramping up. And well, we've known about global warming for a long time, scientists have, but the general public has not understood such an abstract concept that has been difficult to act on. So despite the awareness of scientists, there's a disconnect between what scientists know and what the general public can understand. And it's important for us to know that the climate crisis is happening now, especially in vulnerable communities in the developing world, indigenous communities that are on the front lines, and capacitating the next generation of climate leaders is quite urgent. So usually it takes 10 to 15 years for a country to redo its national curricula, but we don't have that kind of time right now to make sure that climate change is included in our education system. So we need to take innovative methods to make sure that this knowledge is being shared. So in the US, 72% of adults think global warming is happening. However, there's a disconnect between who knows that global warming is happening and who's able to take action on it. So our work is to improve education and raise awareness and human capacity on climate change mitigation, and as well as adaptation and impact reduction. So in this NPR study, you can see that 76% of teachers in the US agree that climate change should be taught in schools, but only 55 do not talk about it with their students. And in this bottom part, it says the percent of parents who talk to their kids about climate change is 45, and 42% of teachers who teach about climate change. And so I think that many people don't take responsibility for whose role it is in society to train the next generation. And these are a few of the reasons that teachers don't teach climate change. And most of them, the largest percentages think that it's not related to the subject areas that they teach. So, and they don't have the materials to teach the subject. So our work has a special focus on making sure that art teachers, geography teachers, history, social studies, all areas of school understand the intersectionality of this issue with all areas of life and have the tools to be able to teach it across subject areas. So a few of the competencies for climate action change makers that we think youth should be developing are the following. And I'd love for you to write in the chat box if you think there's another skill or competency that you think is necessary for a changing world. But for me, one of the most important ones, and it's not necessarily a competency, but a value, and it's empathy. And that is to understand that our actions impact others, and that there are people who feel the effects of climate change more than others, and that we need to have special attention to the vulnerable communities of our society. So we asked teachers in the Climate Action Academy, what aspect of climate change do you want students to learn? And above all else is environmental justice. And for me, this is very important because climate change is not just a scientific issue, it's a social issue. And environmental justice implies the intersection of environmental and social problems. And that's really at the core of the issue that we're facing, is that there's such high inequality in our world, and it's that inequality that's not only causing climate change, but also making the impacts felt in very uneven ways. So what is the Climate Action Academy and what is our training all about? So it's a 4-week course for teachers. It's online. And in the first week, we work with them on understanding climate science and exploring one's personal connection to the climate crisis. So why do I care? What is it that's how is it impacting me? In week 2, the teachers explore resources for teaching about climate change and talk about these core competencies for crisis resilience and how they can embed them into their school curriculum. In week 3, they develop lesson plans for their subject area and for their grade level and workshop them with one another. And in week 4, we include a lot of ideas and inspiration about what youth are doing to take climate action and how our schools can be living labs of sustainability for the future. What can the future look like? And at the end, the teachers get 12 hours of certified professional development, and they receive access to a book online, which you can also access on our website, which is all the lesson plans that teachers have created throughout the course. So one lesson plan, for example, that Dan Karwoski from California made is for math classes, algebra, geometry, and calculus. And he looks at, okay, for geometry, how can we look at the sustainability of our diets according to what's less carbon emitting? So the standard American diet versus healthy eating plate, how many emissions are coming out of the foods that we eat. He also looks at calculus through the lens of emissions over time. And the average rate of the change of CO2 in the atmosphere between 1960 and 2020. So I like that he's making math about real world problems that can connect climate change to different skill sets that you learn in math. So all subject areas of school are important to be integrating these concepts. And through the Climate Action Academy, our main results are giving access to pedagogical material for teachers, and as well as knowledge and methodologies that they can activate in their educational communities. And we also see an increase in teachers' participation in projects related to climate action and their confidence to include climate change in the classroom. So this is the community that we're growing, and I invite you to check out our website, climateactionacademy.org, or you can look us up on social media at 2811 platform. And we're always looking for students and young people who want to present in our sessions about the work that they're doing to show teachers what's possible and what happens when you activate young people to be leaders in society, what amazing changes can happen. So thank you again for inviting me, for listening to this presentation, and I look forward to taking questions at the end.
Thank you so much, Katie. That was wonderful. And I completed the Climate Action Academy, and it was a really valuable tool to improve how I support young people through the FXB Climate Advocates program. So that was wonderful. Thank you. Our next speaker is Tracey Ritchie. Tracey joined earthday.org as the Director of Education in January 2018. Most recently, she was adjunct faculty at the University of Florida and has held positions from Florida to North Carolina, managing and facilitating environmental education programs. Tracey holds a PhD from the University of Florida, where she focused on developing systems thinking skills in students and teachers to more effectively communicate about complex environmental issues such as climate change. Welcome, Tracey.
Good morning. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Karina, and thank you so much for this amazing opportunity to speak to your students and your audience today, and probably good afternoon and good evening to many of the people listening today. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Actually, no, I need to do it from here. Okay, is that coming through okay? Do the presentation. Wonderful.
Yes.
So again, thank you so much for this opportunity. Just a little bit about myself, because I think that's always the piece that I narrowed in on when listening to presenters when I was a student, of just trying to figure out my path and where I'm going and what opportunities exist, and assuring students looking at higher education programs. I took a very circuitous route to get here, and I want everyone to know that that's okay. You can change majors 10 times and try different career options and find your place. So I started off my career really wanting to be a wildlife biologist, and that was my passion, and that was my undergraduate degree, and spent a lot of time working with sea turtles on the coast of the United States. But it was with working with sea turtles and having to do education programs about what people could do to help protect nesting sea turtle populations on the beach at night that I found my passion for education. And I know how powerful that is, to have that either aha moment or that exciting experience that gets you passionate about wildlife, about the environment, about a certain topic that helps engage you for action. And so I really saw the power of telling people really simple tasks that they could do to help protect species across the beaches that they were visiting, or anywhere that they were, where they lived in their backyard. So I went on to get my education in education. I have a master's in environmental education. And as noted in the introduction, I also went on to get my PhD in climate change education. And how do we really effectively break down those academic silos? And I'm so appreciative to Katie for that presentation of just showing how interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary the environmental and climate education can be, because I think that's really critical for students to understand how their actions play into this content knowledge and what they could do to make a difference and help that learning be more interesting and engaging for students to really feel that power. So I've held jobs for working at small nature centers, for government agencies, and now I work for earthday.org, where I lead our global education programs in not only creating resources for educators and students across the world, but also working a lot more on policy these days of how do we make sure that every student in the world gets access to this kind of education. So a little bit more about the background of Earth Day. I'm sure most of you have heard about Earth Day. We celebrated our 50th anniversary last year, as 50 days or 50 years from the first Earth Day that started in 1970, with really just an idea and an interest in getting students activated and passionate about the environmental movement. And so it really took on a lot from the civil war and civil rights and anti-war movement happening in the late 60s in the United States. There was just a lot of unrest, but also the environmental issues were slightly different back in the late 60s, that they were very visible. They were very in your face. Of the smog in urban areas was so bad you couldn't see a few feet in front of you, or the Cuyahoga River in Ohio was literally so contaminated with chemicals it was catching on fire regularly. There was a big oil spill in Santa Barbara off the coast of California, and we knew from Rachel Carson that bird populations were decreasing at catastrophic rates because of chemicals like DDT from agriculture. So things were just out of control, but again, very visible and in your face. And so Senator Nelson from Wisconsin wanted to do something about that and activate people, but especially students, about how they can take action and protect their environment. And the really interesting thing to think about the first Earth Day is that before that, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency in the United States, did not exist. That was an outcome of the first Earth Day, to put into place regulations and things that would hold accountable corporations and governments to making sure that the environment was clean and protected for future generations. So that was really the power of this modern environmental movement, that people came out to the streets. 20 million Americans came out for the first Earth Day, and think that was before social media, that was before, internet. They made phone calls, they mailed letters, they put ads in newspapers to get 20 million Americans to come out to the streets to demand a better environment. And the EPA was a result of that. And we had the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, the Endangered Species Act, and all that legislation to help protect the environment. So it's been an amazing 50 years, but we definitely are acknowledging that there's so much more to do, and there's so much more to incorporate into the environmental movement to make sure that it is a just and equitable environmental movement for everybody moving forward. So a little bit more about the resources and our legacy of how we've evolved over the past 50 years and where we see this going. We have a network of about 5,000 schools, and that's growing every day, to show teachers that they're not alone in this fight and that they're not alone in trying to embed this kind of content into their curriculum. We often see that there's that one-star teacher who has a great passion for this, or there's students that come together to form a club, or there's resources and background that happens that activates a certain sector of a school. But we want to make sure that that support system is there for every single teacher, for every single student in every school in the world. So all of our resources are really meant to help guide you through that process of what is local issues in your community, how do you address local issues and environmental issues, how do you make sure that all voices are represented at the table when thinking of solutions to address your local issues. And not only content for teachers to bring into the classroom in the formal setting, but what can students do to make sure that their voices are heard and increase efficacy in addressing these issues on your own. So a new resource that I'll add to the chat in just a moment is our advocacy packets. And these were actually written by students for students to help you activate your community, your classroom, your school into taking action to address issues that are important to you. So if you want to start composting in your school, if you want a plastic-free lunchroom, if you want to bring in intersectional environmentalism into your coursework, we have a whole range of issues of these packets that tells you what to do, what's the background research supporting this, what does a petition look like to your principal to make this happen, and how do you take action and make sure that your voice is heard in the school level. So it's really exciting resources that we have for you. Everything obviously is free on our website, and we've really tried to be intentional about moving everything to web-based resources as well, so they can be translated into multiple languages across our web platforms. And then just to dive a little bit deeper into what is climate literacy and how our campaign, I'll talk about in just a moment, why we're advocating for this. So climate literacy is really the outcome of climate and environmental education, where we want everyone to be critical systems thinkers about not just the content knowledge of how our ecological systems work and what is photosynthesis, what is the carbon cycle, and what are the processes around us that make sure our environment is a stable ecosystem. But how do we play a role in that? How does the environment impact us, and how do we impact the environment? And really, the most important part I think about this is that it's taking that extra second, that extra moment to consider your impacts and to be really thoughtful about your habits, about your decisions, whether that's what you purchase for lunch that day, how you choose to get to your errands that afternoon, where you choose to live, how you choose to interact with other people. And that it's a progression. You're not climate literate or you're not. It's a progression and a lifelong learning process to be always considering those trade-offs and what your actions are and how you can improve your actions to lessen your impact on this planet. And so we have a campaign because we think that this is such a critical piece for students, that we believe that every student in the world deserves this kind of education. And we think this education needs to be compulsory, assessed, and really have a strong civic engagement component to that. And just to break that down a little bit more, compulsory is just to say we're not advocating for a certain kind of curriculum. This curriculum is going to have to be different across the world to address local issues and be culturally and regionally appropriate. But compulsory is just to say everyone gets this. It's universally embedded across a country so that every student gets access to this. And when I say assessed, I promise you, I do not want you to have to take another standardized test. That is not our goal here, but that we just want to hold teachers, schools, and governments accountable that this is working, that these programs are the best for the students. So assessment just to show growth, change over time, and to, again, have that accountability factor. And then the civic engagement component, I think, is really important, especially to what Katie was speaking to in her example programs that teachers are learning about. It has to have that practical application. Again, just learning about the carbon cycle isn't going to challenge you to think about your input into emissions and what your daily habits are doing. And also, we want to be cautious and careful that some of this content knowledge it is heavy, it is overwhelming, and it's not all positive news. And so we want to make sure that we balance the content knowledge with the civic engagement opportunities to make sure that hope is there, to show you that there's things that we can do, to show you that it's not too late, that there's scientists that are working really hard on this, there's community activists that are working really hard on this, and there's students of all ages working really hard on this to make sure we have a safe and sustainable future moving forward. So the civic engagement is there to balance what's the practical application of this kind of knowledge, and what can we do? And especially in democratic countries where younger students aren't able to vote yet, here's a chance for your voice to be heard. Here's how to be involved in your community, and here's how to make positive change in your community. So that's what our campaign is really about. And there's so many ways to be involved in this campaign and other initiatives that earthday.org has all across the year. I think one of the most common questions I get asked is, do you only work one day a year? And while I wish I did, not really. Earth Day is every day, and our organization works year-round to make sure that there's programs across the academic year, across the calendar year, and that people are engaged in community action every day of the year. So again, there's things to do to be involved in our climate literacy campaign, and I'll share that website in just a moment. We also run the Great Global Cleanup. The main events happen in April around Earth Day, and then in fall around September for the National and International Cleanup Day. But cleanups can happen any day of the year. And now we're coming a bit out of the pandemic in certain areas of the world where it's a bit safer to go outside, it's a bit safer to go out in groups of people. And there's things that you could do and precautions you can take to host cleanups, to be careful while you're picking up litter in your community. At the beginning of the pandemic, it was very scary to encourage people to go out in groups and touch stuff. But now, there's safety equipment you can use, and there's even more of a need, more than ever, of all the PPE that we're seeing, the masks and gloves and wipes that are scattered across the environment. So cleanups are almost more important than ever. We also have a citizen science initiative. So connected to the cleanups, if you were to go out and collect litter, we have a citizen science app called the Global Earth Challenge. We just changed our name, Global Earth Challenge. You can find it in Apple and Android stores. To contribute to citizen science data. Where are you finding that plastic pollution, and what kind of plastic pollution are you finding? We also have different citizen science projects around pollinators, so you can help us identify where you're seeing different types of bee species and other pollinators in your community. There is a food citizen science program where you can help us identify different crops and where they're grown across the world. And the last one is air quality. I always forget that last one. So you can help us take pictures of your horizon and help machine learning, artificial intelligence understand the difference between visibility, what we're seeing for air quality, and what's actually being measured. So sometimes when you see a perfectly clear day, you might think that the air quality is okay, but it might be more harmful than you realize. Or on a day that's maybe hazy or foggy, it might seem like the air quality is not so great, but it's perfectly fine. It's just a natural phenomenon. So by connecting the reporting from the sensors and then the visible air quality, you can help us train AI to understand what is our current air quality and what does that mean. So I definitely encourage you to check out Global Earth Challenge in your app stores to help contribute to citizen science all around the world. We also have the Canopy Project, where we help restore canopies in different parts of the world that were either destroyed by fire or by storm events or different things, where understanding the importance of planting trees, what that part is to the carbon cycle, what that is to the heat island effect and helping to cool certain areas of the world. So the Canopy Project is a great donation campaign if you're looking to find a way to raise funds and help restore canopy to different parts of the world. And then any general volunteering, it doesn't have to be with earthday.org, but somewhere in your community, find a school that needs your help, or a community organization, or somewhere to restore wildflowers, or create a community garden, or pick up litter, or just donate your time to something to make your community stronger, and something that you can work together with other members of your community for something that you're passionate about. So I'll stop there. I look forward to questions at the end, but there's just so many ways that students can get involved and have your voices heard. I definitely encourage you to follow us on social media. We've got tons of volunteer opportunities and ways to get involved in how to make climate education more prevalent in our school systems, and just things that we can do every day to make a difference. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much, Tracey. That was so informative. And I love just that, climate education can happen within the classroom, but it also happens in our communities, in our everyday lives. And, Earth Day is one day a year, but youth are engaged every day. So climate education is something we live and breathe is what I,
Absolutely.
and the resources that your organization has are so clear. They're so actionable that students can just take them and, adapt it to their communities and use them. So I highly recommend that everyone downloads the resources, and the apps are also really great. Thank you, Tracey. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Tricia Brown. Tricia is the Director of Education and Engagement at the Climate Museum. In that role, she creates programming for education and youth engagement, collaborates with nonprofit and educational partners, and manages outreach and marketing communications. A member of the senior leadership team, Tricia also helps shape the strategic priorities and programs of the museum and contributes to hiring and operations issues. She has a background in program development, partnership development, student advising, cross-cultural advising, and public relations through her experiences working for US and overseas universities, educational nonprofits, and the Tokyo government. She has a bachelor's in science from the SI Newhouse School of Public Communications at Syracuse University. Thank you so much, Tricia. Welcome. I'm very inspired by the work of the Climate Museum, so really excited to hear you speak.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm happy to be here today with everyone, and especially inspired by what Tracey and Katie's organizations are doing, and just hearing more about their work just makes me happy that we're all in this together. As Tracey said, every day is Earth Day. We say at the Climate Museum, every week is Climate Week, not just the week in September, where it's focused on in New York. So let me share my screen here. All right, you can see that okay? Okay. All right, so I'm going to introduce you a little bit to the Climate Museum today, if you're not as familiar with us, and give you an overview of our youth and education programs, particularly the way we use arts and culture to engage young people and invite them into climate action. So first, we're going to start with a quick poll question. What percentage of adults do you think are worried about the climate crisis, but silent and inactive, not yet ready to take action? There should be some poll numbers coming up on the screen. Okay, which I don't see, but maybe
people could just type in answers.
Okay.
Okay. Can everybody see the poll?
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
I can see the poll. Great. Okay. Thank you. So actually, less than 100. Okay. So moving on. So you can see here, if you look at this infographic, which is based on data from the Yale and George Mason University's climate communications researchers, you'll see that 60% of American adults fall into the worried but inactive group, which is our target audience. At the Climate Museum, our mission is to inspire action on the climate crisis with programming across arts and sciences that deepens understanding, builds connection, and advances just solutions. And we've been doing public programming. Oh, sorry, I did not end the poll. I'm sorry. I thought that was somebody else. Okay. We've been doing public programming since 2017, and we've created a cultural activist approach to community engagement with climate. We recognize that the majority of Americans are worried about the climate crisis, but they're unsure how to take meaningful action. And they're immobilized either from the scope of the problem, or they just don't know where to start, as Tracey was also speaking about. And so through exhibitions and programs, we invite the public into climate action. And we do that at our exhibition hub on Governor's Island, which is in Lower Manhattan in New York City. And that's open half the year. We also do that at various venues around the city, parks, galleries, et cetera. And then of course, since the pandemic started, we've been doing all our programming online. And we're currently scaling out to a year-round presence in New York City. So let me zoom into climate education at the museum. This shows the progression of our youth and education programs. And an initial climate advocacy workshop in 2018 led a group of students to express their climate ideas through spoken word, which they then performed at a conference. And the power of those teens speaking their climate truth really resonated deeply with the audience. And it was the catalyst for the museum's development of Climate Speaks, our youth climate arts program. And that program has continued on. We've added a number of additional programs, as you can see here, and they all share the goal of amplifying youth voices and giving students agency. Sorry about the New York City ambiance. The common thread of all of these programs is to help people convert that feeling of fear or feeling overwhelmed into action by offering them on-ramps to understand how to advocate for solutions and to be part of collective action. You'll see the youth programs that are focused on here. And a few weeks ago, we wrapped up our spring high school internship program, which married the youth arts elements from Climate Speaks, the program I just mentioned, with advocacy workshops, which mobilize students towards climate action. In a little bit, I'm going to tell you about the Climate Action Leadership Program that we just launched the other day, which is a summer opportunity that welcomes anyone who's interested in volunteering with us this summer and beyond. And what we're finding is that there's a huge demand for this kind of program. And I'm sure my colleagues on the panel have seen the same. There's been a real surge in interest in these kinds of programs outside the classroom. And the youth climate movement keeps growing, and so does the demand for programs. And we feel at the Climate Museum that we can really meet that moment by offering programs that invite young people into climate engagement in ways that feel accessible, inclusive, creative, and empowering. So let me talk a little bit about what the students who find their way to us are seeking when they're looking for more experiential education opportunities outside the classroom to supplement what they're learning at school. We really orient our programs around these 4 learning outcomes. So 1, we give students agency in developing the skill sets that they have, deepening their engagement with climate, being empowered to follow their curiosity, and most important, to break the climate silence. That is a core part of all of our programs, and it runs throughout not just student programs, but adult programs as well. So really empowering people to talk about the climate crisis with those around them. And Katie brought up a statistic I think was really useful, that 55% of teachers are talking about, and 45% of parents. So we can see from those 2 statistics that there's tremendous room for growth, and that the climate silence is all around us, and it just takes one climate conversation to break that silence. Also, we work with students to deepen their climate knowledge. They're coming with various backgrounds and levels of engagement and experience, and we really want to introduce them to climate holistically. So we want them first to understand climate science, then also to examine the social implications, social justice implications of the climate crisis. That's another thing that Katie mentioned, that teachers said they were looking for environmental justice teachings. And so here I'm reframing that a bit as climate justice issues, but absolutely the interconnectedness of all of these issues. And we work with students to engage them on climate arts in different genres and to help them develop the communications and advocacy skills that enable them to feel prepared to take climate action and civic action. We also amplify youth voices by promoting climate leadership, which is working to give students the tools they need to really not only speak up, but spark climate action in others and engage in civic action, which is something that Tracey just spoke quite a bit about. So we couldn't agree more that that's a really critical piece of the equation. Last but not least, the students leave with the sense of community on multiple levels. They have community with us at the Climate Museum, but definitely within the other students in the program. And then they go on to build communities of people who are interested in climate issues in their schools, in their clubs, in their community groups. So let me tell you a little bit about when students are coming to our programs, what they're looking for. So we've done a lot of surveying, and these are the common responses that students give about what they hope to gain from an experiential education experience outside of school, focused on climate. So 2 key areas stand out above everything else. First, they really are worried about climate change, and they're ready to take action. They're seeking ways to feel more hopeful and more empowered to work towards solutions and progress. As Tracey just mentioned, there is a lot of reason for worry and fear, but there's a lot of reason for hope in what scientists are doing and in developments in green energy. So they want to be able to tap into understanding that better and learning how to use that information. And second, they're seeking a climate community. So they want to meet other students often outside their school who are passionate about the same issues that they are. And what we find when they leave our programs is that they're leaving with more optimism. They feel ready to move forward, whether it be as an advocate or an activist or a climate artist. And they feel, as one of our recent interns said, less alone in this fight. So that tells us that we've been able to meet their goals and give them a critical framework for hope. So I want to give you a few examples of the kinds of interdisciplinary programs we've offered focused on arts and advocacy. A few examples of arts. I mentioned already the Climate Speaks program. So when we launched it, it resulted in 14 finalists performing on stage at the Apollo Theater in Harlem in New York City. And then the following year, because of the pandemic, it resulted in a live stream event. These are two photos from that event here of two of our amazing performers performing their original climate writing. Another example is that during the high school internship, students followed an arts track, and they worked one-to-one with teaching artists who mentored them on original creative projects, whether that was written work or whether that was visual arts. One student even created a dance. She choreographed a dance that was performed by her classmates. So there are different ways that students can really explore those kind of creative opportunities. In terms of also the Climate Action Leadership Program that I just mentioned, students who are in that program will have the opportunity to engage in a public art project that we're launching this summer. So I'll say more about that in a moment. And then in terms of advocacy, a few examples. We start from the grounding of students come to us and say, what can I do? And we try to help them understand that we didn't cause this problem as individuals, the fossil fuel industry did, but we can work as individuals together to form community and work towards solutions. And so with that framing, students come and explore advocacy skills. For example, the students in our high school internship program create climate action toolkits and campaigns. They really want to gain the skills and confidence to be change makers in their communities. Students have also come through our training to use the climate ambassador cards, which prepare them to start climate conversations. And as I mentioned about breaking the climate silence, having a climate conversation is a very important climate action. And we talk about all the ways that can be a first step. We also run internships, during our internship, we run workshops focused on climate art for Congress, which is something we've done on our internship. We've done it at student climate summits. We've worked with teachers, different community groups. Climate Art for Congress is a student advocacy campaign that gives students the opportunity to reach out to their representatives. And I'm going to say a little bit more about that in a moment. But overall, all of these examples give students agency to become climate protagonists and to really build a stronger community working towards collective action. So you can see here these examples really demonstrate the kind of the more specific individualized plans that students have put together and what they're able to do. And what's important about these is that each one of these plans has a multiplier effect. So it's not one student in one climate museum program who's running this project. It's students who then go back to their communities, they start these campaigns, they start social media campaigns or magazines or panel discussions or film festivals. And by inviting others into the conversation, they're mobilizing those around them. So in terms of these testimonials, the one thing I like is all of the words that kind of come up often. And when we're surveying students, we really see the transformation that they've gone through when they're in a program like ours. And by the way, a lot of these students, they're not just ending with our program. They're often going on to work with other organizations in this space. And we love to see how they really kind of take these skills and become leaders in the youth climate movement. But you see the kinds of words like leadership, optimism, using creativity for a force for good, et cetera. It really just shows you that these students are ready for action. So the Climate Action Leadership Program that I mentioned, this is our summer program. It'll start with workshops every Tuesday in July. If you scan here, you can get more information and a lot more details. There'll be a series focused on climate action through advocacy and the arts. And students are invited to join one or all of the workshops. And should they complete those workshops, we can invite them to continue on with us to get involved in an ongoing arts project this summer. And the other program I mentioned, Climate Art for Congress. One thing that's important to remember here is that students can do this on their own time. Again, if you scan here, you can get all the information. It's a climate, science, civics, art, and writing project. Students research their elected officials' stances on climate legislation, and then they write them illustrated notes that they send to us. We send it on to Congress, and then we post their letters in our online gallery. And Tracey just said exactly something we say to students all the time, that we want to make sure that everyone's voice is heard. So students are largely under 18, they're not voters yet, but they still have an opportunity to make their demands known. And we always tell students that are doing this project you can either frame the letters to Congress as a thank you to your senator if he or she is already supporting climate legislation that you care about, or it can be a request for them to put more attention on issues that matter to you. And what's really important is that everyone's climate motivation is different. The things that impact us, the impacts that matter to us the most are different. And we all kind of come to that with a different framework, and all of those have room at the table. So here's a picture from our last summer's internship group. And everyone we urge students to just lean into their own motivation, discover how to be agents for change, show them how to break the climate silence, and set them on a path towards climate leadership, because ultimately their actions in their schools and their communities affect all of us. They strengthen the community of people who are willing to take the lead on collective action. So I'm just going to leave you with our website. There's tons more information there, and you can learn about everything I talked about and much, much more. Lots of upcoming programming, all our social media information, sign up for our newsletter, and any questions about the youth programs I talked about, you can email our team at this email address. And I just want to say thank you very much. And
thank you so much, Tricia. That was wonderful. And I have to say, you had high school students with their cameras on, which is
oh my gosh.
for that selfie that you and I know that's like the biggest challenge that educators right, that educators face during the pandemic.
Yes, that was a big part of the culture of our room. Was, you know, it really, everybody gets more from the Zoom room if we can see each other and interact, and the body language is important, and just knowing that you're engaging people. So as long as they don't have tech issues, which sometimes are a blockade, it's great when that can happen.
Thank you. And my son participated in the Climate Art for Congress, which really helped him understand how his local congressperson, acts on climate change. So it was like a really powerful education tool, and just all the amazing programs that the Climate Museum has. Thank you. And thank you so much. So I have a question for all speakers while we take questions from the chat box. How do you think the pandemic has impacted climate education and climate advocacy, and have there been any benefits kind of within the space as we kind of think in this post-pandemic world? Yeah, so maybe Katie, then Tracey, then Tricia.
Yeah, I definitely think that these digital skills that we're developing are very useful and can make our work more efficient, impactful. So we're now exploring like how to work from these digital skills that teachers and students have learned throughout the pandemic, and transfer that into something that can be like equitably accessible also to teachers who haven't had the same resources. So that's something that we're definitely working on. And I think, I don't know, Tracey and Tricia agree that it's kind of been amazing how adaptable we are. So I think that's also a great like inspiration for what's possible for, for humans, that we can adapt to new circumstances and try new things.
Yeah, Katie, I would totally agree that it's shown us how resilient and really amazing teachers are. And they, at first got so much credit. And I hope that credit continues of just what superheroes educators are to pivot so quickly. I think I've seen both sides of the coin that, the pandemic really shone a light on all the inequities that we have across the United States, but especially across the world, of access to reliable internet, access to technology. Sometimes there's just one device per household. And if you have multiple children, who gets to go to school that day? And so that was really eye-opening to see, how do we ensure that all students had access to their education during the pandemic? But also, I think the most exciting part about this time has been, it kind of gave us that opportunity to break down those academic silos of, it's not just math for 45 minutes, then change to a room, and then science for 45 minutes, and then change to a room. It kind of gave teachers a bit more flexibility to talk about these lessons in the real world context and talk about math and science and everything together as they got creative and really worked together. I think teachers really supported each other during this time. So I think that was probably my most favorite outcome of this pandemic, is that we could, talk about real world issues and real time issues of, like, how is COVID spreading? How is it changing our world? How is it changing our food systems? How is it changing, the transportation system, and what we saw, how resilient the environment was also at the beginning of the pandemic. So I thought there was really great opportunities to see real-time science and social impacts, as long as everyone could get that equal access to internet and resources.
Those are two great points. And one thing that I would add is that we found a lot of students in our programs were in school that was not running synchronously. So because of the asynchronous nature, they just had more time, and they used that more time to explore things outside of school that maybe they wouldn't have had time for. In addition, maybe their sports were canceled for a good chunk of the year, or their theater programs. And so all of this after school time that was really booked up before became free time, specifically, and in particular last spring. And then last summer, students saw their internships canceled, their summer jobs canceled. So they had this tremendous amount of time, and they said, okay, I can finally lean in. This has been something on my mind. I haven't known what to do about my interest, but I have this room, and mentally and just actually in their calendar, to explore these opportunities with us, with other organizations that offered summer climate programs online. So I think that was a very unexpected benefit of this very tough time.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's really important to highlight the positive, and especially so we can build on these lessons as we, move forward and do things, differently, but hopefully in a more impactful way as well. Thank you. Another question I wanted to pose to everyone was, what is the, in your opinion, what is the role of climate education in youth advocacy, from the impact that you've seen through the programs that your organization implements? And anyone can jump in.
I would just like to point out that education is not always coming from adults to youth, and this is a really important time for youth to be teaching adults, for adults to be also open to learning from younger people. And so I like that a lot of older climate advocates or teachers are saying, oh, my students teach me a lot, and the projects that they're doing, the agency that they have is going up the ladder instead of down, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, and I think what we've seen is that from all the youth summits, we had several that happened across Earth Day this year, from Earth Uprising to Mock COP last fall, to everything that's happening with the youth movement in the UK and sub-Saharan Africa, across South America. The youth want this, and I'm preaching to the choir here, but I'm trying to look for the link right now, but there was a summit that happened hosted by Earth Uprising that included all the youth activists from across the world, and they had a list of demands, and climate education is at the top of that list. And so I think they're looking for this kind of education to, again, not just build their content knowledge to be, not more eloquent, but have the backing of their demands, but to see the practical application. They want education that's engaging, and they want education that means something and makes a difference. So I think the kinds of programs that Tricia and Katie and I are talking about develop much more than you know, an SAT score. It helps develop skills, hope, problem solving, you know, teamwork. These youth are just phenomenal in what they can do, and running global summits with no adult support at all. They are much more tech savvy and more, I think that also the biggest thing I've learned is just etiquette and protocol of, you know, making sure that everyone feels included, having pronouns be at the top of an introduction, a land acknowledgement at every single introduction of where they are and where they're coming from. I think they've taught us adults a lot about how do we interact with each other and be respectful and inclusive in every step of the process.
I think that beautifully said. And the only thing I would add is that I think students have also learned that climate education, I mean, we've all talked about these interdisciplinary aspects of it. So students are very well aware that climate education is not just about the climate science that they're learning in school. It's all of these different elements, and just giving them the opportunity to explore the justice angles and the arts angles and the advocacy angles and all of the angles. It just helps them to develop the skills that Tracey just mentioned and the competencies that Katie mentioned in her presentation.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was very powerful. Thank you for such a thought-provoking presentations that really left us with a lot to think about and tools to take home for young people and for adults who support young people in their climate journeys. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ashpachari for some closing words.
Thank you. Thank you so very much for this absolutely incredible session. And it was so rich and filled with, most importantly, I'd say love and hope. And this is what I really take away, because I think that, you know, there are umpteen ways for us to be involved. I totally agree with the important perspective of the fact that, you know, we need to celebrate Earth Day and our planet every single day of the year. And this is such an important message. But what I want to underscore for everyone as I take away really in your voices and your beautiful action is that we have hope. There's light. And certainly the time for us to act is now, and most certainly that window is small, but there are so many of us now, and we've built up so much momentum. And I have to thank each one of our incredible panelists for making an absolutely invaluable contribution to making that happen. I mean, each of you is a movement by yourselves, and coming together is a very, very powerful force. So I just want to say thank you so much for sharing, for being here, for being the light, and for showing us the way. And I truly believe that love and light and that leadership will indeed get us to the other side. So I just want to say your partnership, your voices, your wisdom, and your action is of the greatest value beyond what words can say. And thank you for being here and for sharing, because you are the inspiration. You are an absolutely critical part of our family. And I thank you for being that family for us, for all of us globally. And I'd like to convey my deepest gratitude to Karina and all at FXB for bringing us together in this absolutely brilliant session. I mean, I can literally feel the energy physically. So I just want to say thank you ever so much. I've had the good fortune of interacting with some of you over a period of time individually, but being here together and hearing your voices has truly been transformational at the level of the heart. So thank you very much. I'd also like to thank all our incredible youth mentors and participants. This is really what it's all about, and you are indeed the change. I just want to say thank you for your phenomenal leadership, for being on the forefront, for being relentless. And so with that, I just want to close because I want to respect everybody's time. But I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I truly, truly mean that. Let's make this, let's make this more than just a day of June 9th. It's every single day, the 365, on and on. And I know we can make it happen. We're already well on our way. So I know we're not physically together, but if I was, I want you to know that I'm sending you the biggest hug and all of my love and gratitude. And with that, thank you so much. And I'm really looking forward to tomorrow, the first day of the rest of our lives. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Dr.
Dr. Ash.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
We hope to see you in the next session, Innovation and Technology Leading Entrepreneurship to Take Climate Action, which starts in another 2 minutes. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's